Hello, thank you for joining me today. I'm Jan Clothier of Thinking Stamping, and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in New Zealand. And today I'm going to share with you how I made this pretty little pair of cards using the inked and tiled stamp set. It's from the 2023 to 2024 annual catalogue, and it comes as a bundle. Unlike most bundles, which come with a die, this one comes with a pair of punches, and we're going to use this punch in today's card. The part of me that once upon a time used to be a maths teacher loves the fact that these two punches will in fact tessellate, and I'm going to experiment with that at some point in the future. Okay, so inked and tiled, some beautiful sort of watercolory, moody little floral images, and I like the fact it's got lots and lots of different sentiments, like it covers everything. Happy birthday, thank you, congratulations, just a note, lots of love, and hello friend. Yeah, so today I'm going to make a birthday card, but as always, of course, you can change it up to make whatever you want. It's the beauty of making your own cards. The colours that I'm using today are based around the latest challenge at Colour Inspiration, where I'm a crew member. Now it's our 150th challenge, and whoever picked the challenge this time went for quite an extravagant and lush and colourful colourway. So we've had to create something using Pretty Peacock, Old Olive, Pumpkin Pie, Sweet Sorbet, and Calypso Coral. And initially my clean and simple heart kind of had a little flutter at the thought of trying to use all of those colours. However, I came up with these cards. I'm going to show you how to make one of them, because in fact really they're the same card, just with a bit of a twist. So I'm going to show you how to make this one, and then at the end I'm going to tell you how you tweak it up to make this one. So, to start off with, what we need is a card base, and I've done my card base in Pretty Peacock because it's just a fantastic colour. As always, for me, it's a standard card size, so it's half of an A4 piece of paper, 21 centimetres wide, scored at 10.5, and I've cut it at 14.8. And if you're an imperial person rather than a metrics person, you know, just use whatever your standard card size base is and whatever standard layers you'd use. If I say it's half a centimetre or 5 millimetres shorter or narrower, that's about a quarter of an inch, I think. Okay, so you've got a card base in Pretty Peacock. Now I've got a little piece to mat, and I've used Calypso Coral for that, and it is, as I'm about to say, half a centimetre narrower than the card front, so it's 10 centimetres that way, and it's 14.3 centimetres that way. And then the panel that we're actually going to do the stamping on is going to be half a centimetre smaller again. I better just make sure I've got the right piece, because I've got a few bits of white floating on my desk. Yep, so this one is 9.5 by 13.8. Okay, and those three are going to layer together. Now, what else do you need? Well, you need a piece for the inside, and so I've got just a piece of basic white that's 10 by 14.3 to put on the inside, but that's for later, so we'll pop it away. You need a little piece of Pretty Peacock so that you can make the sentiment. You don't want to cut your piece too small, because it's got to go into the punch, and with a punch you always need something to hold on to, so you know, don't just cut yourself a little tiny piece. What I've done with that is I have white embossed the happy birthday. Now for me, my class people often ask whether they should do the punching or die cutting first or the stamping first. I always say do the stamping first, because it's much easier to manipulate the die or the punch around a stamped image than the other way around. So I white embossed this, and then I manipulated the punch over it so I could get it nicely centered. And you also need a little piece of Calypso Coral just so you can punch out one of those little star shapes. Okay, that's pretty much all we need. So it's really quite easy on resources, but most of the action happens with the stamping. And for me, I really love to colour my stamps directly. I think it's a technique which works best with rubber stamps. You can do it with photopolymer stamps, but I personally believe you get a better result with a rubber stamp. Now, in the past, I've always used a Stampin' Write marker and just drawn my colours on. This time I've gone a little bit different, so I'm going to use sponge daubers. Now, I have, like I'm sure most of you do, a bag of sort of used and battered sponges that I just kind of randomly find something that's close enough to the colour I want to use. If I'm doing a class, and it turns out if I'm making a video, then I do it the proper way, and I've actually labelled each one with what it is so that I can reduce the chance of accidents. So if you've never done this before, it's pretty much just like using the markers, only you're using a sponge dauber and the inks. So I'm starting with Old Olive, and I'm just going to ink that up, and I want the stems to be Old Olive, so I'm just putting some on there and a little bit on leading into the leaf. I should also say, because I forgot to say it before, if you see anything that I use today and you would like to add it to your craft room stash, then and you live in New Zealand, please shop with me. There's a link to my online store in the video description below, and it's going to pop up through the contacts in the end card as well. So I've done Old Olive, and now I'm going to pop in my touch of Pretty Peacock. I'm going to put that beside my ink pad. Okay, so now I've got the Pretty Peacock dauber, and I'm just going to dawble a little bit onto the leaves, and then I'm going to start with a Calypso Coral on my flowers, and so the whole flower is covered over with Calypso Coral, and then I'm going to go in and accent it with some pumpkin pie. Oh, you having just perfectly labelled my markers, look what I've done. I've picked up pumpkin pie and used it on Calypso Coral. Well, just as well I want the colours to mix up then, isn't it? So to fix that, I'm going to go back again, and I'm just going to dab that off a bit. Okay, so now I'm going to just put a little bit of pumpkin pie just in the centre of the flowers. Okay, now you can just stamp directly, or you can do the old huff trick, just a little light breath over it to loosen up the ink in case it's dried. Okay, and now the moment of truth, I'm just going to stamp, and I'm going to do the same thing I always do. I'm going to count to 10 in my head so the ink's got time to transfer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh yes, lovely. Now, I'm not too interested in whether or not colours mix up again, so I'm not going to clean my stamp second time round. I'm just going to go the whole thing again. I'm going to do Old Olive on the stems and a little bit on the leaf. Then I'm going to get out the Pretty Peacock and do some leaf and perhaps the bottom of the stem. Now I'm going to do the same deal again with the flower head, only I'm going to use the correct dauber this time. I'm going to get my Calypso Coral and colour up the head of the flowers. And I'm now going to, though, put some Sweet Sorbet into the centre so that I'm getting in my extra colour for the challenge, but also I'm getting a bit of variety in them. Okay, so I'm going to close that one up. Just red inks make me nervous. Okay, so now I'm going to do my little again, and I'm just going to stamp it off on a bit of an angle and see what we get. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes. Right, I'm just going to get this tiny little stamp here, which is that tiny one down here, and I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I'm going to do it slightly differently. I'm going to start with Calypso Coral, and I'm just going to stamp it, ink it up. But then I'm going to get my pumpkin pie dauber, and I'm just going to put a little bit of pumpkin pie on it, and then we're going to do the same thing. Stamp 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm going to close up pumpkin pie because I don't want to mix it up. I'm going to stamp that off. Okay, Calypso Coral again, And this time I'm going to add in a bit of sweet sorbet. Where will we put it? Ooh, perhaps we'll have it here. And I'm just going to wait and see whether I need another one. I'm going to see what happens when I do the sentiment, whether I've got a bit of space that needs filling up. I think that's probably enough on this one, but we shall see. Okay, so I'm just going to pop my inks, my daubers, and those stamps out of the way. I'm just going to pop that out over there so it doesn't get any kind of tragic accident happening to it. And now I'm going to worry about these little leaves. So hopefully I said at the beginning, I can't remember now, that you need another piece of basic white to do a bit of extra stamping with. I may have accidentally missed that bit out, sorry. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this leafy stamp here. Here it is. I'm going to ink it up with Old Olive. And then I'm going to take my some Pretty Peacock and my handily labelled Pretty Peacock sponge dauber. And I'm just going to pop in randomly some bits of colour, although it's not completely random because I'm focusing on the stem and the bases of the leaves. Okay, can do the same thing. Little breath to loosen up the ink. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, and now I'm going to do that one. I wish it had come out a little bit more, but I think it's going to be all right because it's probably going to tuck in under the sentiment. If that was a worry to you, then I would simply just turn it over and do another one. In fact, what I'm probably going to do is wait and see. Try it out, and if it doesn't work, well, then I'll just stamp another one, because that is another one of the joys of making your own cards. At the end of the day, everything's really only just a piece of paper, and it's easy enough to do another one. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, you see, that is a much nicer one, but I still think we'll be okay. Now, time to get out the paper snips and a quick bit of a fussy cut. Okay, so now I've got my 2 fussy cut leaves. I've got my stamped panel, my mat, my card front, and my bits of sentiment. So now it's pretty much straightforward assembly. So, bit of glue to just glue together the panels. We'll do that now. And you know, the glue gives you the wiggle room. Now, with these sentiments, all I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit of glue on the Calypso coral. And I'm just going to offset it so that the peaks pop out into the gaps. Now with glue, you've got a bit of wriggle room to just sort of straighten it up and get it looking right. Okay. And when you're happy with it, pop it aside. Now what we're going to do with these two is we are going to probably snip them a bit short because we don't need those stems. They're not going to be on display. And we're going to artfully arrange those over the base of our bunch of flowers. And when we're happy with it, we shall attach them, and then we're going to pop that into the center. So you can just kind of do a little visual memory of it, or you can make a little pencil mark about where you want the end point to be, just to, you know, help you with the placement. So I'm not going to glue hard out all over the leaf because I quite like a little bit of lift. So I'm just going to put some glue down the center, go back to my little line up, pop it in. And as suspected, that tiny little bit there, which didn't perhaps come out quite as cleanly as I might have wanted it to, is not going to be any kind of a disaster at all. Okay, so now we'll just pop that one there. And I mean, you can play around with what angle you'd like them to be on. whether you want them like straight out or on an angle or swishing that way, whatever you like. And now, again, you've got a choice there. You could just glue it on, or you could pop it up on a couple of dimensionals. And I think that's what I'll do, just because I am a dimensional lover. So we'll pop that in there, flick off the backs, and whoops. Then we shall just, I'm going to line that up with my grid paper so I've got a better chance of keeping straight. Oh, pretty, pretty, pretty. Now, embellishments. For this card originally, I used iridescent pearls. And for its sister card, I used iridescent rhinestones. So, what am I going to do now? I think I will. Here's the iridescent pearls and here's the rhinestones. I'm going to go a bit rogue. We'll have rhinestones on this one. I'm going to pop a little one in the centre of these little fluffy flowers. And because I've got a bit of a gap there, I'm going to pop I'm going to do a large one or a middle-sized one. I think I'll do a middle-sized one there. And then perhaps we'll just have a big one there and maybe another middle-sized one, just because I'm a bit nervy about not having, where will I pop it? Just there perhaps, just to help fill that visual gap a little bit. Okay, now there is our completed sister of that one. And you can see it comes out slightly differently each time, like depending on exactly where I put those flowers, depended on how many and where I put the little fluffy ones, just to sort of visually fill up the space. What did I do on the inside? Well, on this one, I have just taken a piece of 10 by 14.3 and I've just stamped, again, I've done the same thing, stamped it in with some old olive and pretty peacock, and it looks like I've just used sweet sorbet on the top and a calypso coral fluffy over there. On the inside of this one, I did the same thing, but I matted it onto a piece of coloured cardstock just for a bit of variation. Now, as promised, I said we were making a pair of cards, and I said that they were essentially the same card and that I would explain how this one is different. Well, obviously, the stamping is pretty much exactly the same. The sentiment is exactly the same. What's different is these things. So I used a Calypso Coral card base. The other thing I did was I used very vanilla rather than white. Now, I did start with a piece that was the same size as this, roughly 9.5 by 13.8. But then when I'd stamped it, I got out the decal-edged dies and I cut it down to, I think I used the second largest one. Let's just test that out. Yep, so the second largest of the decal-edged dies. And I did that so that I could show off this little paper border. Now, the paper comes from the rest of the suite. So the inked and tiled bundle is what we've been using, but it does have a set of paper, the Inked Botanicals Designer Series paper. So I just used the one that was Calypso Coral with the very vanilla dots on it, and that is cut to 10 by 14.3. Then I added my panel, which is really this panel stamped on vanilla but cut out with a decal-edged die, and then actually everything else is exactly the same. So from one idea you can get two completely different looking cards. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that little introduction to the inked and botanical, the inked and tiled bundle, which, as I said, it bundles with these two different punches, which I'm sure you'll see me using in the future. Hope you've enjoyed what you've seen today. If you have seen anything that you would like to add to your craft stash and you live in New Zealand, please don't forget to shop with me. There's a link to my store in the video description below and in the social media end card, which is about to pop up. As always, I'm more than happy to answer questions, and you can contact me in the same way through the details in this description and in the end card. If you've liked what you've seen and you haven't subscribed to me already, already, please do so you don't miss anything new that I do. And above all else, everyone, happy stamping.